came in. In fact, I saw him when he came in Thursday night and never got a chance to talk to him. And he's been surrounded all week with everybody and haven't really had a chance to spend a lot of time with him. And we took a walk this evening. And, you know, all week you try to figure out what you're going to say nice about a guy when you get ready to introduce him. And I was listening to poor Susie tell her story here today, and I was wondering, what the hell can I say nice about this guy? That poor innocent little thing got hooked up with a guy like this, and I was thinking, what could I say nice about this guy? And so I've avoided him all week. I'm very honest with him. I just haven't had time to fool around with him. And so after dinner, we went for a nice walk out here and took a walk around the grounds, spent some time together. And I've heard a lot about him before I get a chance to met him this weekend. I've capped him, heard him in Florida, and et cetera. And I thoroughly enjoyed sharing with him. I'll be honest, he's my kind of drunk. I could relate and identify a lot with him. And I'm excited about him being here. I'm looking forward to listening to him. And I want to give you now at this time Keith from Yuba, Linda, California.
I'm an alcoholic. My name's Keith. By God's grace, Alcoholics Anonymous, rooms full of people like you, and a little effort on my own. I haven't had to take a drink or do any dope since May the 11th, 1976, and for that I'm especially grateful. I want to thank the board for inviting Sue and I to participate this weekend. It's a real privilege to be able to participate in my own recovery. When I'm in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, the world is a safer place. I can assure you of that. All the speakers this weekend have pretty much praised the board and the retreat, and because they're associated and know the place, the facilities, and have been here. And it has a lot of meaning to the people that have spoken here this weekend. And I too have a special feeling about being here. When I was brand new in Alcoholics Anonymous over 16 years ago, like a small child, like a sponge waiting to draw up something that's profound, I was sitting in meetings in Alcoholics Anonymous in California, and the people that you saw here tonight that led the countdown, Dave C., and Julian, who stayed up here, they were the speakers there. And I was absolutely amazed when I heard Julian that somebody could be so smart and not know nothing. I was just amazed. I wanted to learn how to do that. And I've been here for several days, and I'm still amazed. And Dave was out there speaking around on the West Coast when I was new, and what a pillar. I mean, he's an example. And I go around different places where these people have talked, your people who are part of your board here, and they're respected in Alcoholics Anonymous. Not just for their time, but as a human being, as a human being who practices these steps and these principles in their life. They're respected. And I wanted that. And it's an amazing thing. I say these little things because I know there's guys sitting here, especially back there on the back row, some of them outlaws on the back row back there. I talked to them this weekend. My sponsor tells me to talk to them kind when I go to these places, so I feel like I'm home. And I know that you're sitting back there with 3 months, 11 months saying, I'd like to be a speaker someday. I could do that. And that's the way I sit there. And I thought, I could do that. And, if they had told me I was going to have to do this when I come to Alcoholics Anonymous, I'd have never sobered up, I'll guarantee you. But it's an amazing thing. I've stayed here, and these people that were the examples, by their examples, taught me certain values, and since then I've been able to be on programs with Julian. He don't remember, but I was there. I was probably a fill-in speaker, but I've been with him and on the program with him, and what a privilege it is to be here and to be with them, and they're people that I love and respect today after 16 years of being around here, and they're still. I was sitting sharing with Dave last night a little bit. One of the greatest things, we go around and share a lot in these conferences and stuff, and you can hear all this stuff, podium talk. But one of the greatest privileges of being able to do this is to go someplace where these people you've heard speak are home. Where they're home. Where you see them with the people that they go to meetings with, the people they sponsor, the people they're on committees with, and you see them practicing those principles. That's real stuff. That's real stuff. And I'm privileged, Sue and I both are privileged that we've been able to go into people's community, their AA community, and be a part of that. Just like this evening, whenever you see these countdowns, the countdown is a great thing, and I always have a reflection whenever I see these countdowns, because to imagine, even today, to imagine 40 years of sobriety or 30 years of sobriety. And yet, what I reflect on is, do you realize when Julian was standing here with 45 years of sobriety, imagine how many alcoholics it took for him to get that 45 years. We always say, well, we'll say this serenity prayer for those that are suffering alcoholic or those that are not here, or whatever. Imagine how many alcoholics the people that were standing at 40 years had to talk to get 40 years. Thousands of alcoholics they had to talk to. Thousands of alcoholics that they talked to who died of this disease, who didn't make it. But yet somebody who had the time to stand there and talk to another drunk gets the time. And I always reflect on that, because, that's one drunk talking to another drunk. And I was privileged to be able, Sue and I, Dave asked us to come here a little early, and we came here Thursday, and we got to come to the board meeting Thursday evening, and I listened to Julian talk, and the old timers. Tom led the meeting, and I love that, because I get to hear those people talk among themselves. And one of the things Julian or somebody talked about was the fact that the people who didn't make it taught us so much. They really did. Not to look down on them, because we are really fortunate to be able to be sober today, physically sober. And I learned so much about how to live by the people that made the mistakes. And I was acquainted with a man down in Texas, an old timer down there, that used to tell a story about that I reflect on. He told a story of a lion and a fox and a dog that went rabbit hunting. And after the end of the day, they had this big catch of rabbits, and they bring them in. And so the lion told the dog, he said, divide the rabbits up. So the dog goes over and he divides the rabbits up in 3 equal piles. And the lion told the dog, so which pile's mine? He said, well, they're all the same. And the lion, he killed the dog. Flung him right, dead, right over there. And he told the fox, said, now, Mr. Fox, you go divide the rabbits. So the fox runs over and he divides all the rabbits, pulls them all into one big pile, and he takes one off and sets it over to the side. And the lion asked Mr. Fox, which pile's mine? He said, well, the big one, of course. And the lion said, Mr. Fox, where'd you learn to divide rabbits? He said, from that dead dog over there. And I certainly learned how to divide rabbits by watching some of those things. For every year that I've been sober, there's been one person die who I have spent time with trying to convince them that what I'm doing is right, as it was convinced to me. I've spent time with, every year that I've been sober, there's been one person who will tell me, you don't need to go to meetings, you don't need to get a sponsor, you don't have to work the steps, you don't have to do this, you don't have to do that. And I would try to convince them that what I was doing was right. And to prove that what I was doing was right, they went and died. For every year there's someone who has given their life to prove that what I'm doing is right. And I never forget those feelings. That's not a morbid reflection, because this is not PTA here tonight. It's a retreat. It's a celebration of sobriety. It's something where we come together and we feel a camaraderie. We come together and we see people that we don't see for months on end or maybe years, and we come together. And this is not about turning it off. This is about turning it on. I lived all my life in some kind of a fantasy about what I'm supposed to do. And for the last over 16 years, I've lived a life beyond my wildest drunken dreams about what I can do. That I'm not inhibited by my fears anymore. And it's the examples that you see here tonight. It's the examples of the old-timers. I love the old-timers. To me, they're as important, if not more important, than the newcomers. Because if it hadn't been for the old-timers that pulled me along, if it hadn't been for the old-timers that believed that when you're 10 years sober or 5 years sober is just as important to help you as it is when you're 5 minutes, 5 days, or 5 months. And there's people in this room that are like that, and I have had the privilege of knowing them. And it's truly a compliment to be here. I'm a real alcoholic by the definition of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. It defines a real alcoholic in there. It defines a moderate drinker, heavy drinker, and a real alcoholic. And I'm a real alcoholic by that definition. I love it. It says a real alcoholic, someone who's insanely drunk most of the time. It says a real alcoholic's a real Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It even says a real alcoholic will do a little dope now and then to enhance their thinking and their drinking. I'm grateful it said that, because I don't identify with anybody specialized. You specialize, that's fine. I'm a pig myself. Just do anything, anytime, anywhere. It didn't make any difference. I'll go with the deal. And I'm grateful for that definition because I fit it to a T. I'm a fourth-generation alcoholic. My daddy's an alcoholic. His daddy's an alcoholic. His daddy's an alcoholic. That's as far as I want to check it. That's enough. I come from a long line of drunks. And I don't know if I was born an alcoholic or not, but I know this much. When I had my first drink, an alcoholic was born. And I had a drink early on. My grandpappy was an old drunk. He was one of them devil-may-care chaps. And he used to take me with him. And him and his crime partner, an old boy by the name of Siebert Barr or Slicker Jim, and they'd get in this old 34 Ford and they'd go out and do business. And my job as a little kid, 6 years old, was to hold this jug of corn whiskey. And I'd sit in the front seat of this 34 Ford coupe, and they'd take the cork out of this jug, and they'd start drinking. And they'd throw the cork away. And my job was to sit there and hold this jug of whiskey. My grandma sent me with my granddad so he wouldn't come home drunk. Now she needed help right away. And I'd sit there and put my tongue down in that jug. And I'm probably drank before I was 6, but one Saturday afternoon, cold Saturday afternoon out there in the Texas-Oklahoma Panhandle, they come off one of them side roads. They'd been down there trying to do some business with a farmer, and they headed north on one of them old country farm-to-market roads and an old 34 Ford, and they'd been drinking, and I'm holding that jug, and my grandpappy made a near-fatal mistake. Going 50 miles an hour in that old 34 Ford into probably a 50 mile an hour north wind, the door was ajar, and he opened that door on that 34 Ford to shut it jarred loose, and he opened it, and the door on 34 Ford opens from the front. And he forgot to let go. And it slung him right out of there like a sail cat into the bar ditch and skinned him from one end to the other, and Slicker didn't even know he's gone for 5 miles. And I finally got him shut down, and we backed up, and I'm 6 years old holding this jug, and we backed up, and the old man's skinned up from one end to the other, and he's lost his glasses, and he's drunk falling around out there. And everybody goes to town on Saturday afternoon to do their shopping and what have you, and so they're stopping along there, and here's the old man drunk, and I'm scared to death because Grandma's going to be mad. And I got that jug, and pretty soon somebody said, give the old man a drink, and they gave him a drink, and he poured some of that on his hands and rubbed it on his face, and Slicker took a drink, and then somebody said, give the kid a drink, and so I took a drink, and then they give it, and everybody took a drink, to give the kid a drink. Pretty soon, standing there alongside that road on that Saturday afternoon, I didn't care if that old man lived or died. Now, I come to understand, I didn't stay drunk from the time I was 6, but I learned something. I'm a quick learner. And standing alongside that road that day, I recognized something. And that book tells us, that big book of Alcoholics Anonymous says, men and women drink for the effect. And the effect is after some amount of consumption, you can't distinguish the difference between true or false, right and wrong. And I took some amount of alcohol in me that day, and I didn't care what anybody did or what they thought. It worked for me. And my grandpappy had asked me to go with him. He's going fishing. He always used to put out them old catfish lines across the river, them trot lines, and he'd get all them chicken innards and put them in the back of the old pickup truck, and we had an old 40-something-year-old pickup truck, and I'd get in there with my old grandpappy, and he'd be drinking that whiskey, and I'd be going down the road. We was going one day, and I was holding that jug for him, and he needed a drink, and I handed him a drink, and the buzzard flew off the side of the road right into the window of that old pickup truck. And it flew right into our lap, and Grandpappy run that pickup truck off the side of the road, upside down with a buzzard in the front seat and chicken guts all over us, and drunk. And I immediately lost the desire to go fishing. I did not understand that whiskey had anything to do with that. I just thought that Grandpappy had a run of bad luck. And growing up in an alcoholic home, you encounter those kind of situations. Now, there's a lot of people say growing up in an alcoholic home messes you up for later life. I believe in my case, if you live through that, you're a survivor. I grew up with selfish, self-centered, self-seeking, neurotic, insane people, and I lived to get out of that. An amazing thing is, 36 years later, I come to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I sit down in a room full of selfish, self-centered, self-seeking, neurotic, insane people, and you said, I'm home. And if you can make it here and all the resentments and committees, you got to have some survival tools, see. And I didn't, stay drunk from that age, till I, got it going, but periodically I would indulge because we grew up around alcohol all the time, and I'd drink and what have you, and there's all kinds of alcoholics, all kinds of stories in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous about alcoholics, and that's why they have them there. And you hear people talk about their inadequacies and what have you. And I come to understand there's three basic kinds of people in this world. There's people who will watch things happen, there's people who will wait for things to happen, and then there's people who make things happen. And I just happen to be one of them guys that makes things happen. You hear alcoholics talk about having those inadequacies, and they felt, inward and couldn't talk, and couldn't communicate, and they're hanging around the dances and waiting for somebody to come along and give them a drink, and then they can feel good and go dance. I brought the band. I love them guitar pickers. I sat up there last night and listened to them boys play them guitars, and I'd have stayed there all night, And I love that kind of thing. That's the way I was. I'm sure I had the feelings of inadequacy. I'm sure I had the feelings of fear and all those negative emotions. But, my drug of choice in sobriety is adrenaline, and I had that feeling all the way along. I wanted to be where the action is. I like the deal. Deal me in. I don't care where we're going. I want the deal. And I've been that way all my life. It was a character defect I brought into Alcoholics Anonymous. It's been hard to surrender. But that's the way I was. I was ready to go. I didn't like to drink with people that had to go home because they're going to work tomorrow. I didn't like to drink people to go home because their wife was going to be mad. I didn't like to drink with people like that. I liked to drink with people that just went until it was over. And then they laid down wherever they were and woke up and went again. And that's just the way I was. And my daddy is a drunk, and my daddy was a ladies' man. He was a lawyer. I have never resented the fact my father became a lawyer. Kept him on retainer for years. Loved the old man to be a lawyer. Grateful he is. He's a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous today, and I love him. He lives out in the Texas-Oklahoma Panhandle, and we have a good relationship. He's my father, and that's all I ever wanted him to be. And because of this program and the steps in this program in his life and my life, we have a good relationship. We have a father relationship. It took me 10 years of sobriety to pay back my financial amends to him, and when I gave him the last check, he says, "Is this any good?" But I love him, and we have that good relationship, and all I ever wanted. And I grew up in that kind of an environment. By the time I was 18 years old, I'd spend a third of my life locked up with people observing my behavior patterns. And people go to school all their life to observe people like me's behavior patterns. And they want to ask them stupid questions like, "Why did you do that?" I didn't know why I did that. If I knew why I did that, I wouldn't have wanted to did it. And if I'd had to figure it all out, it would have taken too long to figure it all out, and I would have lost interest in it, and I would have had a thought of something else. And if I knew why, it might be too boring, and I wouldn't want to think about it anymore. And if you knew why would you even do it? I didn't want to know why. I just wanted to know when. And they never asked me when. They said why. And I never had an answer why. And so they were asking questions. They were asking questions about apples, and I had answers for oranges. I've always had all the questions and only 50% of the answers. And they asked me those things, and I didn't understand it. So I had a blank look on my face a lot. And when they're interrogating you, that makes them mad. Makes the little vein in their forehead just pulsate. And I had, by the time I was 18 and a half years old, I'd been locked up, studied, dipped. I grew up in the Baptist Bible Belt. Them Baptists dipped me, sprayed me. Oh, man. The best I could ever be was a Buzzard Baptist. That's the only time I ever went to church when there was something dead or something to eat, a funeral. They tried to save me, and I just couldn't be saved. And I made a solemn vow. I got out of a little jail trouble down in South Texas, and I caught a train up into North Texas there to meet two of my very best friends. And so I'm going to tell a Texas story. Don told a Texas story last night. I'm going to tell a Texas story, and you'll have to rely on the spiritual speaker tomorrow to shape you up. But a Texas story starts out like this. You're probably not going to believe this, but I'm going to tell it anyway. And I come out of that jail down in South Texas, and I called up my two very best friends, Oily and Goose, my very best friends, growing up boys. You know, good old boys, the kind of guys say if you get in jail, we'll get you out, and if we can't get you out, we'll get in there with you. Redneck tough. Had an old pickup truck with shotgun and rifle in the back, 3-2 beer and White Lightning. And I rolled in off that train, and I crawled in that pickup truck with Oily and Goose, and I did my first fifth step. I didn't realize it, but looking back on it today. And I told Oily and Goose, I'm going to quit hanging around with guys like you. When I hang around with guys like you, I get in trouble all the time. And I got to stay out of them honky-tonk bars. When I get in them honky-tonk bars, I get in trouble all the time. And they'd say, yeah, you should stay out of them places. And as soon as we get home, we're going to have nothing to do with you. And I said, I got to stay away from them sick women. Oh, man. You can line 10 women up against that wall over there, and I'll get the sickest one every time. Bet on it. Love them sick women. I like them a little trashy, too. You know, them honky-tonk girls. Ready. They're ready. You know, they're ready. They don't know what's going to happen, but they don't need to pack. They're ready. And I'm telling them, they said, you should stay away from them. By the time I was 18 and a half, 19 years old, I'd been married, divorced. I don't know what happened. I know I married a rich woman, and her daddy come in one day and said, I'm a very wealthy man. I said, I noticed that. He said, I didn't get this money because I made bad investments. And you're a bad investment. And they throw me away. And I told Oily and Goose, I'm going to stay away from these people. And they said I should. And at midnight, we pulled up in front of this old honky-tonk dance, one of them old Quonset huts. And we walk inside, and I want everybody to know I'm home. It's midnight, the band quit playing, and I walked in, and they used to drink them old, big, thick Coke bottles that you couldn't take your whiskey and bottle in. You'd pour half full of whiskey on top of a Coke. Pour the Coke out and fill it up. So them big old heavy Coke bottles, and I grabbed one of them, rolled it down to the end of the dance floor, bumped the stage where the band was coming off, and I said, let the meanest sucker in the house bring that back. I'm home. It looked like a stampede coming my direction. I mean, them old boys come off the wall charging me, and I hit the first guy leading the charge because he's stupid enough to lead the charge. He deserves to get punched. And the fight commenced, and I split because I'm telling you, it looked like you could get your helmet braided in there. I may be sick, but I'm not stupid. And I run over to the woman's restroom to hide till the fight was over, and there was a lady standing there, and I said, tell me when the fight's over, and I ran inside and hid. Pretty soon she stuck her head in and said, you can come out now, cowboy. And I figured, okay. I come outside. The band was playing. She's handy, so I asked her to dance. I'm a quick study. One quick dance. I found out she had a job. She had a car. She had money in the bank, driver's license. And I fell in love immediately. Didn't make any difference what I told Oily and Goose I was going to do or wasn't do. I said that many times, and immediately there I am. I'm in a honky-tonk, and I'm falling in love. And I'm going home with this lady. I said, where you been? I haven't seen you all my life. She said, where you been? I said, well, I've been in penitentiary. She said, well, I've been in an unmarried mother's home. And I said, we deserve each other. We didn't fall in love with each other. We fell in sick with each other. That's where the rocks in my head fit the holes in hers. You know, it just kind of went together. I said, stick with me, baby. I'm going to take you places you've never been before. I did, too. Most of them she didn't want to go, but I took her anyway. And we set out to life a rip-roaring drunk. I mean, I was just going around, up and down, just wherever it was happening, I went. And after 2 years of kind of a little relationship there, she gave me an ultimatum. I don't know why it is sick women always want to give drunks like me an ultimatum. I ain't going nowhere. She said, if you don't marry me, I'm going to kick you out. I'll marry you. I'll marry you. And we got married. And all of a sudden, the thing about my kind of drunk, I accumulate things along the way, none of which I know anything about. But I accumulated a wife, I accumulated a daughter, I accumulated a 120-pound German Shepherd dog that hated me. They sent me to obedience class with this 120-pound German Shepherd dog, and we both got 86 out of obedience class for being violent. We got this cat that's scratching and clawing and screaming around the house all the time, a bawling kid and a crazy woman. And if you had that, you'd drink too. And eventually I had to leave Texas. That'll happen to you if you stay there doing what I was doing for a while. In AA, they call them trips geographics. But when I left Texas, they called it unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. Time to leave. And I loaded up everything we had into this old trailer and the station wagon, and we headed for California because a guy named Lion Shorty offered me a job on a ranch 40 miles west of Long Beach, and I didn't have sense enough to know it was ocean. And we took off. Hey, oh ye of little hope. I remember a guy one time said he had a fifth of whiskey, stuck it out about that much in the bottom, and he says, "You want a drink?" And my buddy said, "No, you don't have enough." And I said, "Give me that." Where there's one drink, there's always another one. Oh ye of little hope. And that's the way we went. And we took off. Took us a month to get there. Most people could do it in 3 days. But you know how a drunk is. We just take off. Don't need a map. Don't need to go to the bathroom. Don't stop till you're out of gas. And you just go. My wife would say, "Don't you think you ought to ask somebody where we are?" And I said, "No, if I asked, they'd know I'm lost." Get there and find out we wasn't where we were supposed to be, and we'd say, "Well, look around, we're sightseeing," And it's crazy. And by the time we got to California, it was just insane. And a drunken uncle of mine helped me get this old house. We can always find a deal. I got a deal on a house that nobody lived in for years. Somebody put 2 or 3 yards of gravel in the backyard and they just kind of, leveled it out there. We're going to, build a patio. I don't know. The place is pretty shambles. And there's a bunch of hippies living on one side of me. I've never seen none of them down in Texas. They're taking that LSD and dropping all their clothes and laying in the front yard watching the sun come up and go down. It's going blind. I'd left my buddies all in Goosebound, Texas, and there was a couple of hippies over there, one named Doc and the other named Professor, and I filed that away because I ever needed any good information. You need to go to people who know things in case you... And I knew anybody named Doc or Professor would have all the information. Motorcycle gang living on the other side of... it's an amazing thing. Wherever I go, I take me, and I'm the first one to get there, and there I am. No matter what I do, when I go there, I just like flypaper. I can promise you I'm going to get away from this stuff. But wherever I go, zoom, there I am, because it's comfortable. It's much easier to fall back into that because it's comfortable. And I took up a little residency right there in that old neighborhood, and, I'd go off and do my thing and come back every once in a while, and there she'd be. This woman's just going crazy all the time. Took up carrying a butcher knife all the time, waving this knife around all the time. I like guns myself. Slam dunk somebody upside the ear with a 44 Magnum pop a cap right there beside the ear, and they'll pay attention to you. They won't hear nothing, but they'll pay attention to you. And this woman's crazy. I'd stick this gun on the end of their nose, and she'd stick this knife in my stomach and she'd say, "You go first." I said, "You're crazy. If I shoot you, you'll die." She said, "I know, but when that bullet hits me, and the knife will go like that, and you'll die on the way out." There is Oriental warriors that train all their life to be able to get the last kill. And a pre-Al-Anon knows that intuitively. They do. Intuitively. They don't need no training or uniform. They are willing to give their life in order to watch us die right before their very eyes. She'd always set up these pots and pans inside the front door so I couldn't sneak up on her. I don't know why she did that. You could hear me coming for 1.5 miles. I always run them rim home. Them rim riders home where you got the 2 little rows down the street, up over the people's yards, and down through there, everybody's running out getting the kids out of the way because here he comes. And she'd set up these pots and pans inside the door, and I'd come in, and I always carried my gun in my boot, and I'd come in and I'd step in one of them pans. And it turns the toe of your boot up, and you can't get your gun out of your boot. As you're bent over trying to get your gun out of your boot, the dog's biting you, the cat's scratching, the kid's bawling, and she's trying to stab you, and I'm trying to say, "Daddy's home." I've come a long ways to do my civic duty. And I don't know about you, but I always brought people home with me. You know, I don't know who they are, but they're my very best friends. They're the guys that don't want to go home and fight their old lady, so they come watch me fight with mine. And so we get everybody in finally and bed down like a bunch of old coon dogs, lay down there. My wife slept with this butcher knife on her nightstand right there under the pillow for 12 years. And I slept with a loaded .45 on the nightstand, a rounding chamber, safety off the hammer back on my nightstand. That was not to protect us from the people outside of the house. We loved each other. Now, you want to know anything about God in my life, there had to be a God when you lived like that, see? And a couple of times I made some near fatal mistakes. One time I come home and she's giving me the what for, and I passed out on her just a few minutes into a 2-hour conversation, and they don't like that. And she stabbed me all over my back. When I come to, I said, "Gee, what's the matter with my back?" I said, "Oh, I don't know. Let me look." "Oh, you broke out of acne in the back drinking all that rot gut whiskey." She said, "Let me put some rubbing alcohol on you." Now, I've been sprinkled and dipped, but I've never been baptized that got me closer to Jesus than that deal, I'll guarantee you. I ended up standing in front of a judge, and he's talking to me about me, and he's got the right guy, and I never did understand all that stuff, and nobody ever taught me about Alcoholics Anonymous. I was trying to do my civic duty. I'd try to mow my front yard. I'd try to take care of the thing, you know. I didn't have much of a maintenance program, and I'm trying to tell the judge about this. And he's talking to me about my behavior pattern. I was mowing my front dirt, and my lawnmower died. And I figure, you know, it's something I brought from Texas. When a horse lays down, you just shoot him. You know, I know that. When my lawnmower quit, I just blowed a hole in it with a .44 mag. You're supposed to shoot the lawnmower, not your foot, Don. See? And so I'm out there, and my mower died, and I blowed a hole in my lawnmower with a .44 mag. And the cops came and wanted to talk to me about my behavior pattern. And they took me down and put me in jail, and I'm standing in front of the judge, and the judge's talking to me about me, and he's got the right guy. And he's talking to me about maybe doing a little time I didn't want to do, and he gave me my first option of going to Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, I didn't know what Alcoholics Anonymous was, so I didn't have anything to fear. I didn't want to go to jail, and so I said, I'll go to Alcoholics Anonymous. And so my parole officer and everybody got it all worked out where I could call this guy in AA, and I called him, and he said he'd come get me, and I went home that afternoon out of jail, and I laid down, and my wife had been to see the lawyer, and the lawyer said I should go to AA, and I want her to think it's her idea, so she come home, and she said, I think you should go to AA, and I knew it. I knew to come to that. Matter of fact, I called a guy in AA today, and I asked him about it, and he said he'd come get me. And I said, no, I'll get there. And he said, there's a meeting right around the corner. So I'm laying there on that old couch, and she come over there about 8 o'clock and stuck that butcher knife in my face and said, get up. I had some reference points, so I hopped up after she stuck me a couple times. We went out and got in the old Pinto station wagon and moseyed over to this church, had a big AA sign out in front of the church. And I thinking, man, if the guys in the neighborhood see me going into this church with this AA sign, I've sunk to the bottom. And she stuck that butcher knife in my face, said, what time's that meeting over? And I said, it's over at 10. She said, I'm going to tell you something, dude. If you come out of that door before 10, I'm going to gut you. So I went in and I sat in that meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I stayed there, one meeting a week for 4 months. Now, you can keep a drunk like me sober for a while. You got a crazy woman circling the perimeter with a butcher knife. I'll stay in the room. I won't learn nothing, but I'll stay in the room. And I didn't drink or use nothing for 4 months. Most miserable time of my entire life. My wife said it's the best time we'd ever had. And I just laid around and waited for another meeting. And I didn't know there was any other meetings. And I just laid there, and she'd come along on Monday night, get up and go out there. An amazing thing happens, you know. There's people who come to Alcoholics Anonymous. There's basically two kinds of people, been my observation. There's people who come to Alcoholics Anonymous to change the conditions in their life. And there's people who come to Alcoholics Anonymous to change their life. And if you come here to Alcoholics Anonymous to change the conditions in your life, and that be the only reason, you'll probably drink again, because the conditions will change. And yet the same man will always drink again. You see? And so I didn't come here to change me. I came here to change the condition. And I sat in that one meeting a week, and I just stayed there. An amazing thing, I developed a little trust, and after 4 months, I beat the deal down at the courthouse. I'm sitting there in the house on Monday night of that meeting. The old dog's laying next to me, pat him on the head. The cat's in my lap purring. The kid's over here, pat the kid on the head. You know, she's in the kitchen, I'm back in the big bedroom, and I thought to myself, well, you have prematurely gone to Alcoholics Anonymous. I know I'll be there someday, but I'll be old like Tom or somebody. I mean, they got to quit drinking. They got nothing reason to drink anymore. There was people like that, and I thought, you know, I'm going to drop by that meeting tonight and resign. And by then, she let me go by myself. And I went over by that meeting, and I said, I'm not going to get a sponsor. I'm not going to any more meetings. I'm not going to work the steps. I'm not going to do so nothing. And this old fool looked at me and said, oh, you must be going to go to BB. I said, what's that? And he says, I don't know. But where you're going sure ain't AA. And he wasn't kidding, because I got struck drunk immediately. Boom. And my life changed. Because there's nothing worse than being out there with a head full of Alcoholics Anonymous and a belly full of booze. It just makes you crazy. You just know you're a loser then. You know them people are doing it, and you're not. And in my life just got worse, and then it got worse, because it always does. It never gets better, it always gets worse. I remember a thing I heard in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, except maybe one old fool one night when I was over in a meeting, says, we won't guarantee you've had your last drink after tonight, but we'll guarantee after tonight you'll never enjoy another one. I remember that when I was sitting in the bar having a drink. Wanted to kill him, wanted to go back over there and drive over him in the parking lot, you know, if I'd have had a car. And I mean, my life changed. I'm a physically violent kind of an alcoholic. It's motivated by fear. Fear is an unbelievable negative emotion, and it affects people in different ways. My inventory showed me. And, you know, if I were to pick up a drink tonight, I wouldn't be that funny guy sitting on a bar stool telling a funny joke. I'd be somebody just physically crazy. And fear is a motivator, and fear is an unbelievable emotion, because to some people it demobilizes them. Fear will demobilize some people, and they'll back into the corner like a old mule, and you can't get them out without a stick of dynamite. And fear to me is like an adrenaline. It turns into anger, and anger's energy, and I'm like the book talks about, the people that roar through the lives of the others. And during that next 4 years of my drinking, my life was just unbelievable, and there's a lot of physical violence in the home, physical violence out on the streets, and I just was around people like that. And the book tells me I'm to share with you what it used to be like, what happened, and what it's like today in a general way, and thank God it's in a general way. Thank God that the people who wrote this book said that. But I share with you, not the big deals that I did, and not the big things that gave me fame and fortune, because all of us have our own big deals. We have the potential to do that. But standing in my kitchen early in the morning, look down the hallway, a little 9-year-old girl standing down the end of that hallway. She got her chin on her chest and her hair's in her face, and she got an old coat on, an old Raggedy Ann coat that she wore all the time. And the lining had dropped out of that coat, and the only food that her mother would give her, a lot of times she'd hard-boiled eggs, and that kid had put a hard-boiled egg down in her pocket, and it went through the hole in that lining where she pushed her hand, and it went around in the lining back of that coat, and she'd sit on it. She looked and smelled like she looked and smelled. And early in the morning, standing down there at the end of that hallway, she looked at me and I looked at her, and I took a drink out of that bottle because I didn't have a choice. She did not run down that hallway and grab me around the leg and say, Daddy, please come play with me. She didn't say, please don't beat me and Mommy. She looked at me and I looked at her, and there was no shame. There was no shame. Shame was long gone in that home. Shame was a commodity that had long gone. There is a place where you can go and live, the gray zone, beyond hate, beyond feelings, and those of us who drink like my kind of alcoholic drinks takes our loved ones there with us. And they didn't have a choice. And standing there that day, take a drink out of that bottle because I had absolutely no choice. It didn't make any difference. I looked down that hallway, and when I looked back down after I took a drink out of that bottle, that little girl was gone. The only thing she wanted to know is which direction I was going, so she'd go the other way. Because at that time in my drinking and my disease of alcoholism, she knew when it worked and when it didn't work. Animals and children know when it's working and when it don't work. They watch you because if it's working, certain things happen and they're safe. If it don't work, they better get out of your way, because God help you if you're standing in front of me when I need another drink. Or maybe the very best father that I could be early one afternoon, needing a drink bad. Needing a drink, crawling out of the back of that house on my hands and my knees. And nobody's standing around saying, hey, Ace, tell me another big story about another big deal. No, I was lip-dragging drunk. lip-dragging drunk, whistling down the hallway on one of them old linoleum hallways, lip-dragging, gurgling, talking to yourself drunk. And being the very best father I could be, I crawled in that little girl's bedroom. The only money in that house was in a Raggedy Ann piggy bank in there under her bed, and the change that I'd bring home occasionally I'd give to that kid. And I crawled down the hallway into that bedroom, and on my hands and my knees, I drug her piggy bank out from underneath that bed, and I broke it there on her floor. And I'm separating the pennies, nickels, dimes, and the quarters because a big-time Charlie like me ain't going to take no pennies down to the liquor store. I'm going to be flashing silver when I go. And on my hands and my knees, I don't know about your kind of drunk, but my kind of drunk, whenever I'm at my worst and somebody's watching me, I got a sixth sense. I got that feeling in the back of my neck to make the hair stand up when I know somebody's watching me. And that day, being the very best father that I could be that day, I had that feeling, and I looked over my shoulder, and a little 10-and-a-half-year-old girl is in that closet behind me. She's hiding in that closet. She didn't go to school that day. She's got a busted lip and a black eye. And I'm pretty sure I had something to do with that. And sick, needing a drink, wanting a drink. I'm stealing her money. And on my hands and my knees, being the very best father I could be, I could give that kid a break that day. She stayed home from school that day, not because of the shame of how she looked. She stayed home that day because if she'd gone to school one more time looking like that, the cops would have come and got Daddy. And if the cops come and got Daddy one more time, yeah, they'd take him away. But he always came home. He always came home. And she stayed home that day to save the pain. And being the very best father that I could be on my hands and my knees, I give that kid a break. Can you imagine that? I give that kid a break. I let her shoot out behind me without inflicting any more pain on her life. Because you see, at that point in my life, if you catch me at that worst, if you catch me when I'm stealing from you, when I'm at my worst, it is absolutely necessary for me to umbrella some kind of a memory on your mind that overshadows what you saw me doing. You can bet on it. You don't know when it's going to happen, but you can bet on it. And being the very best father I could be that day, I give that kid a break. I let her shoot out behind me one more time. And I lived that way not a day or a week or a year. I lived that way for 4 years. And the people around me lived that way because they didn't have a choice, because I told them they had no choice. You see, I'm the kind of an alcoholic, my kind of an alcoholic, that as long as there's one man, woman, child, dog, or cat that will enable me, that will help me, that will fix me, that will save me, that will bail me out, that will put the deal together one more time, I won't do anything about me. I'll walk right over you. I run out of friends and enemies at the same time. God help me. Nobody left. And I crawled out of an old motel room for the very last time, May the 10th, 1976, and I came back down in the area where I live. And this is why I love the old-timers, the people that love AA, that know that book, and know how to do them 12-step calls. And through a series of events and people who were praying for me, and I know those prayers worked. A little gray-headed man showed up in my house one afternoon. Showed up in my house on May the 10th, 1976, and he's standing in my front door, and he said, "You don't have to take a drink again as long as you live if you don't want to." I couldn't even conceive how you could do that. It was like talking Chinese to me. And I love the old-timers that know how to set the hook. You know, they don't let you off. They set the hook. And that little man looked at me, and he knew that telling me that I didn't have to drink was just words. Because he knew my kind of, yeah, you can say that. I've been to AA before. But he set the hook. He said, "I'm going to tell you something, dude. You don't ever have to be lonely again as long as you live." And he set the hook. Because, God, we know the loneliness. We know the loneliness, the terror and the bewilderment, the fear inside, like the hole in your gut where the wind blowing through, whistling through there. It doesn't make any difference who you're with or where you've been. You know you are just exactly what you are. And you know all the truths. And I suppose that if there's any point of reference where the booze quit working for me, that's when it really happened. If there's any time where I crossed over an invisible line, there's a time whenever I'm standing there and it don't work no more and it don't make no sense what anybody says and it make no difference either. And it don't work no more and you feel that feeling of hopelessness. And I believe my kind of alcoholic has to get to that point. And I believed that little man, and I followed him like a total and complete stranger would follow, a puppy dog would follow. I followed him, and I believe that's the greatest reference point of my entire life. It's the very first time in my life, bar none, that I had no conditions. I didn't say, if you'll fix me, if you'll take care of me, I'll do this. I had no condition. A total and complete stranger walked into my life and said, you don't have to be lonely again, and he set the hook. And I followed him like a complete stranger would follow anything. I don't even know where the desire to do that. I trusted no one. I love it when you come here and people say, I don't trust anybody. Well, sure you don't trust anybody. How could you not trust anybody? Because you're not trustworthy. See? I had no trust. The worst curse of a thief is that he doesn't trust himself. And I followed that little man, and he took me down and put me in this old detox with a bunch of other guys, and he said, I'll come back and see you. I'm your sponsor. And they put me in there with a bunch of these laughing hyenas. They'd take 3 steps and laugh, 3 steps and cry, and they had a bunch of old sober drunks coming to see us, and we just in there shake and bake. 3 steps and laugh, 3 steps and cry. And everybody was in there drunk. We was all just trying to sober up. And there was 39 of us in there, and we stayed in this old detox for about a month, and I had this wife and kid. I didn't know what was going on, man. I didn't have nothing. And these old-timers would come and see us. And they'd come down there to see us, and they'd come in there and say, one of them would come in and say, well, Tommy was in there here to see you, but I'm your new sponsor. And I didn't know what a sponsor was. They said, yep. He said, matter of fact, this guy said, he's a little guy. His name was Ron. They called him Rotten Ron. And he said, we drew straws for you, and I lost. And I said, what's a sponsor, a friend? And he said, no, if you want a friend, get a dog. I had 120. Time to get out. And the last day that I get ready to get out of this thing, well, this guy was going to come pick me up. And, it was an amazing thing. They got all 39 of us and set us in a circle, and they let us take each other's inventory. We'd been in there for about 40 days, something like that, and they put us in a circle, and we went around the room. Funny how God works in my life. There's little reference points in my life. Maybe you haven't. But that day, the guy sitting next to me on my left started this thing. He went around the room. And everybody in that room talked about how God had moved in their life. Everything was wonderful. They got their families back and how they worked the steps while they was in that detox. And every one of them said, but Keith's going to drink when he gets out of here. And he'd go around the other and say, I've done all this wonderful stuff. I want to love everybody. Everybody's great. But Keith's going to drink when he gets out of here. 38 people said I was going to drink when I got out of there. They were so convincing that I almost said I'm going to drink when I get out of there. And when it come my turn, I said, not me. And the amazing thing about this, if you're new or relatively new, don't believe a vote. I'm the only one out of 39 that's still sober. See? And there's 11 dead, 7 suicide sober. And there was a little fire, a little fight inside of me that day, that last day, and it's still there. It's greater today. The enthusiasm, the pilot light in there, that it don't make any difference how you say how wonderful it is. There better be a fight inside of you. There better be something in there that'll tell you whenever everybody says you ain't going to make it, it better pull that cord back a little tighter and say, I can do it. I know I can do it. I know there's a power out there that'll help me. I know there's people that'll help me. I know I can do it. And I come out of that thing, my sponsor come and got me and took me home, and I went home and knocked on the door. My wife come to the front door, and I said, I got to go to the meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous every day for the rest of my life. What are you going to do? She said, well, I've been going to Al-Anon, the kids been going to Al-Anon, the dog's been going to Al-Dog, and the cat's been going to Al-Cat. What are you going to do, dummy? I didn't know what to do. I went and called my sponsor, and he said, I'll be over there and get you, don't worry. And so he come and got me and started taking me to me. When I sobered up, I had long hair, long beard, I hadn't taken a bath in a long time. I was just kind of, a real newcomer. My sponsor used to stand me up over there and point at me. He'd tell other people, say, if you go back out, you could end up like him. And I didn't know what to do. They told me to cut my hair and trim up my beard a little bit. My sponsor took me down and he got me a set of clothes. Sponsors have all these people that, really can't do too well themselves, come to find out. But this one guy sold clothes, and so, my sponsor took me down there and they got me a deal on clothes. They got me this nice suit and a vest, and they got me some underwear and some socks, and explained to me, you get all this stuff, you wear it, and you get the colored underwear so you can reverse them and get a lot of mileage out of them. And they wear them vests so you go out and get the chili on them, and you can turn them inside out. They got to explain that to drunks like me. Oh, all right. I didn't understand it. And they got me a car. I had an old pickup truck that went down the road crooked, and they took me down to this other guy that my sponsor sponsored. He had a used car lot and had a big Lincoln, big Mark IV Lincoln out there, a big old long hood ornament stood out there, and they made me a deal. Nothing down and nothing for 30 days. And I said, I'll take it. And I went home and I put that big AA car up in the driveway, and my wife's looking out there and wondering what's going on. I mean, I was so crazy that I'd get up on Saturday morning to go to a meeting. And every once in a while, newcomers are tired when they get to a meeting. I'd get up on Saturday morning. My wife would run in there and get on the phone and call her sponsor. And I would think, well, I've got to get to that meeting early this morning. And I think, who am I? And I think, well, I'm from Texas. I'm a cowboy. So I go put on my Levi's, my cowboy boots, my leather vest, and my cowboy hat, and I go out and kiss her goodbye and go out and get my old pickup truck and drive it down the street, and I'd hit the red light down there somewhere, and I'd look in the rearview mirror, and I'd think, no, I ain't a cowboy today. I'd turn around and I'd drive back up and put it in the driveway, and I'd go in there and I'd think, I'm a biker. I'll go in there and I'd put on my leathers and I'd get in front of the mirror and I'd make a couple of noises about ripping my Harley Davidson up, and I'd growl a little bit, and I'm going to run down that meeting and rip some stuff up. I'd go out and kiss her goodbye, and she'd be talking to her sponsor, and I'd go out and get my Harley fired up, run around the neighbor 2 or 3 times so make everybody in the neighborhood mad, and roar down there to the meeting, and I'd get down there about halfway down there, and I'd look in the rearview mirror, and that mirror would be, oh, no, I'm kind of a marshmallow today. I'd whip her around, run back, put that motorcycle in the garage, run in there and think, well, I'm smart. I know something. I'd go in and put on my 3-piece suit and go out and get the dictionary out and look up 4 or 5 of them $75 words so I can impress everybody in the meeting. And I'd run out and kiss her goodbye and go out and get in the big iron and drive down the street, and I'd hit the red light, and I can't even remember them big words I was going to say in the meeting. And I'd turn around and go back home and run in and take off that 3-piece suit and put on my sweats, run out and kiss her goodbye, and run to the meeting. You had 4 or 5 identity crises the time you got there. You're tired. One time my wife's sponsor said, how many people live in that house? Well, I don't know. The alcoholic just don't know who he is today. Well, I only change 3 times a day. The problem, you come with these things, you keep losing your tags when you change clothes. You know, I got it down to about 3. That ain't bad. But I was just crazy, and I didn't know what to do. I tried to work the steps. He said, you know, work an inventory. When you're new and crazy, and they say work a moral, fearless inventory. Now, the book says men and women drink for the effect, and after some amount of drinking, you can't distinguish the difference between true and false, right or wrong. That's the definition of the sociopath. How can you do a moral inventory? Craziest thing I ever heard. And then fearless, I'm riddled with fear. I'm afraid of fear. And so my sponsor tricked me. He said, do a fear list. And I wrote 157 things on a piece of paper that I was afraid of. And he took a pencil and wrote them all together and got it down to 10. Did not go to a meeting and think about that. I went to a meeting and I thought about those 10 things. I run right back home, run number 11. All of the above at once, you know. And I tried to do that immoral inventory. I didn't know what to do. I was just trying to work the steps, and I was going crazy. And I would go down there on Sunday morning, and I'd stand in this meeting hall. My sponsor made me stand over in one corner, and I put on that suit, and I got in there. This guy that was a cop in AA, he gave me a grenade. And he said, when it gets bad enough, put that grenade in your mouth and pull the pin. That's as good an inventory as you're ever going to get. And I stand there, I had my big Lincoln parked out front, and I'm standing there with my suit on and this grenade, and my sponsor standing over on the other side of the room pointing at me, telling people that I'm crazy, stay away from me. And I looked around, and there's a weirdo standing next to me, the weirdest looking guy you ever seen. Had hair sticking out everywhere, had a funny little hat on with strawberries and cherries on it like a welder's hat. He wasn't short enough to be a man or tall enough to be a midget, just weird. I'd seen him in the meeting the night before, and he was the treasurer of the meeting, and they asked me for a financial report, and he stood up and said, I stole all the money, and I'm not paying it back. And they said, keep doing it till you get it right. And here he is standing next to me, and I said, why don't you comb your hair? And he said, I did. And I said, heck, you did, man. His hair just stuck out of it. So, where'd you get that hair? He said, I give myself permanent. And I said, oh, man. I said, what do you want? And he said, will you be my sponsor? Oh, gee, I can't even take care of myself. How can I help you? Just a minute. I was waiting on a lawyer, a parole officer, or a cop to come in and ask me to be their sponsor. I went over to my sponsor. I said, see that weird over there? And he said, yeah. I said, well, he just asked me to be his sponsor. My sponsor said the dumbest thing. He said, yeah, I know. I sent him over there. He said, you go back there and tell him you'll be his sponsor and do exactly what he said. That don't make sense to me today. But I never questioned the old-timers, you know, because they know everything. I've come to find out later that they send you to do things that they are thinking about doing, and if it works for you, they'll try it. But I went over to that weirdo and I said, my sponsor says I got to be your sponsor. What do you want to do? He said, oh, I want to go for a ride in your Lincoln. I said, give me my grenade back. You know? And I got him out in that Lincoln. On the way out of that room that day, we walking out the door. Two of my very best friends leaned against the door jamb back there, looked at us, and as we went by, this weirdo says, that's my new sponsor. I said, man, don't tell people I'm your sponsor. Them guys look at us, boy, it's going to be fun to watch you two grow. And I got that guy in that Lincoln, and away we went. Man, he started talking some of that sick stuff, and then he just stopped and he'd say, you ever do anything like that? Yeah. And I'd start telling him some of my stuff, you know. Until a couple times he had some sick stuff. I had to kind of stretch my story a little bit to one-up him. You know, you can't let him one-up you. Later he told me, he said, I know some of the stuff you told me that you did. It had to be a lie because it's physically impossible to do some of the things you said you did because I went home and tried. You know how it is, you're moving right along in AA. By the time we'd been sober around the program a little while, her working a program, kid going to Alateen, and dog going to Alley Dog, and cat going to Alley Cat. Prosperity sets in about 3.5 years. You get credit cards back and all that stuff. And so we moved out of the old neighborhood and moved in a new house, and I was over there in my new house about 3.5 years sober. I got out of one of them driveways that was blacktop, and in my area, you get a concrete driveway, you're something. And I had me a new concrete driveway with no oil spots on it. I was proud of that driveway. Look what sobriety did for me. I got a concrete driveway with no oil spots. Any newcomers come, you don't park in my driveway. And I was over there, by the time you're 3.5, you move into a little TM, a little meditation, take your clothes off and contemplate your navel or something like that. I don't know what. I was trying it all, trying to get close to God. And my sponsor told me to stay away from them self-help books, but I was sneaking around trying to do it. One Sunday morning I was trying to do it and come and knock at the front door, and I go to the front door, and there's that weirdo standing there. Got a big book in his hand with paper stuck in it. He's got his old car parked in my new driveway. Oil running down my new driveway. Had stickers all over that car, and I knew the neighbors would know now. And I said, what do you want? And he said, I want to work the steps like you did. And I think, how'd I work them? I'm trying to remember. I know I worked them. I said, get in here quick before my neighbors see you. And I got him in the house, and I said, the first step says I'm powerless, and I know I am because I let you in my house. And it says my life's unmanageable, and I'm sure of that because it looks like you're going to be here for a while. And the second step says that I'm crazy, and you're crazy, and I'm pretty sure that's true because I understand you, and you understand me, so we must be on step 3. And I said I had to get on my knees with another human being and do that third step prayer. And he got on his knees right there in my kitchen and said, get down here. So I got down there next to him and opened up the big book, and we said that third step prayer together. He cuddled up underneath my arm. The cat went by and looked at us weird, and I'm thinking, man, if my wife sees me on my knees in the kitchen with this guy, she's know I'm going to whack it out for sure. And he jumped up and said, now I want to do my 4th step. And I said, you're supposed to have that done before you get to your sponsor's house. I know that. And he said, well, I can't write. And he pulled some papers out of that big book and threw them down in front of him. He said, I'll talk, you write. He started talking, and I started writing. Pretty soon he said, do you ever do anything like that? And I said, yeah, I did some stuff like that. And I started telling some of my stuff, you know how it is. And a couple of things come up. I forgot to tell my sponsor when I did my 5th step. And we'd done invited God into the room, and he couldn't read. So I just put some of my stuff in his. You know, what the heck. That's what it's all about. You got to get it out. Pretty soon he jumped up and ran over there and kissed me right on the cheek and said, I love you. And I figured, well, that's it. Divorce her and follow him. I don't know. Everybody's hugging around here anyway. Run out in the front yard Sunday afternoon, waved real big in front of God and the neighbors and everybody and said, I love you. And I think, well, now they all know. But I know something for the first time, my very first time in my entire life. I sat in that house that day for over 4 hours with that young man, and it's the first time I'd never thought about me. I was more concerned for that individual than I was myself. Up until including that time, 3.5 years sober, all I could think about was me. And I'm grateful for the old timers. I'm grateful for sponsorship. My sponsor knew that if I didn't start giving this thing away, I was going to die. And he asked this guy to come and ask me to be my sponsor and, to be a sponsor. And I started walking him through those steps. And for the first time in my entire life, I let another human being see inside of me. And that day, I've come to understand, looking back on that day, it's the first time in my entire life I knew anything about love. Anytime before that, if you said you love me, I just knew that meant I was next. Whatever, that's the first thing you put out on the table. What am I going to bargain with? And I come to understand today that love is an action for my kind of an alcoholic. It's an action. The first act of love is the act of transparency. I must let you see in. Because if I don't let you see in, I'll never be able to see out. See, when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, it was like looking through a straw. Everything was right under the microscope. I had no peripheral vision at all. I had no feelings or emotions. I only knew anger and fear. And that day I let that guy see in my life, and we sit there like two human beings, men. Standing there telling those men stories, you know, the things you don't talk about. That guy had two little girls, and he was sitting there, he had a daughter about the same age as mine, and he was telling me that day, he told me about his daughter coming home one day after school, and she crawled up in his lap, and she put her arm around him and said, "Daddy, I love you. I'm glad you're sober." And she opened up a little thing, one of them little flowers those kids cut at school, and she said, "I want to give you a flower that'll never die." And she opened up this little flower, and she put her arm around him. And he sat there, and he told me that. And I told him about being sober a little while. And my daughter coming home one day, and she asked me what I was doing on Saturday morning. I said, "I don't know what I'm doing." She said, "Give me a little piece of paper and note on it." Unbeknownst to me, she's going to Alateen, and they suggested she'd, try to set some goals, and she wanted to be a model. And she'd gone down and enrolled in a pre-modeling class, 13 and a half years old. She went down and enrolled in this modeling class, and here it was. She'd gone through a couple of these things, and I'm sober a little while, and I didn't even know she was doing it. I knew she was going to Alateen because we made her go to Alateen. Sue and I, she was young enough to be intimidated, and we forced her to go to Alateen, and I come to understand, it's just my opinion, I don't know how anybody could come to a program of Alcoholics Anonymous, or Al-Anon for that matter, and find a way of life to live like this and deprive their kid of that. How can you be so selfish to say, "I hurt them enough"? No. How could I come here and find something so precious as this and not give it to my children? And we gave her the freedom to hate us, and she'd gone to do this, and I'm telling this guy about this, and I tell him, she gave me this little piece of paper, and she said, "Daddy, come Saturday morning, I'm going to graduate from this modeling class. Would you come down?" And I went down there that day, and I walked in the back of a room bigger than this, and people all full of it, and I didn't know any of them. Leaned up against the wall back there, my cowboy hat, my shades on. I looked out on the stage, and pretty soon a bunch of little girls come walking out on the stage. And pretty soon my little girl come walking out on that stage, and she held her head up, and her hair wasn't in her face, and she had a glow about her. And I'm leaning up against that wall back there, and I wanted to scream to those people, "If you only knew the hell that kid come out of." But it stuck right in my throat because, you see, I couldn't say nothing because I couldn't take credit for it. The only thing I'd been doing is just staying sober one day at a time, one heartbeat at a time. But I got to lean against that wall that day and feel the feeling and cry them daddy tears. Not tears of sorrow, tears of joy. And that's what I shared with that ding-a-ling sitting in my kitchen that day, and we sit there and we cry. And we talked about the hell we've come out. And I don't know about you, but I can share with you about me. The reason that religion can never give me that is because the same theme of this retreat, serenity, a spiritual way of life, you see. And for me, and I know for me, because I've been here long enough to experience, the difference between religion and spirituality is very simple. Religion is for people who are afraid of going to hell. Spirituality is for those of us who've been there. I've been there. And standing in the back of that room, I knew the hell that little girl had come out of, and I could feel the feelings of joy. And I shared that with that guy that day. And I knew that day, beyond a shadow of a doubt, why my sponsor told me to do a fourth and fifth step. Because it opened the door. And it qualified me to receive a fifth step. And you see, it doesn't make full circle until you hear somebody else's fifth step. And I had that day had completed that full circle, and I'd sit there and listen to that guy's stuff, and I didn't judge him for what he'd done. Matter of fact, I loved him more for the strength to tell me. And he sat there that day, and he told me about, the fears, and he talked to me about freedom, and I thought freedom's doing what I want to do anytime I wanted. I thought freedom's when I got you laying on the floor and I got a gun at the back of your head and I'm taking your billfold. I thought I have you. I don't have you. You got me. Those values have changed just by being here. And sitting there that day, that guy put his arms around me and he said, "I love you." And I felt a feeling. I felt a feeling I never felt before in my entire life. And it made full circle. And I've been doing that ever since.
In over 16 years, I've listened to over 500 fifth steps. Listened to them. I don't tell you that to brag about it. I tell you that because what I told you when I came here, I had no conscience. I didn't know the difference between right and wrong. But I sat and I listened to these people before me. And I listened to them talk about the feelings, and I got in touch with the feelings, and I craved that knowledge. And I'd sit there, and I didn't know whether it was anger or fear or the emotion. I couldn't label it like the psychiatrist had. But I'd sit there, and I'd have the feeling. And by sitting there, and I'd listen to the fifth step, and I'd work with them new guys, and I'd go into the penitentiaries, and I'd listen to them guys. And when they were talking about those emotions, it was like I was a sponge. And when I'd hear you talking about that, and I'd identify with those feelings, I could put something on me. And because I've listened to that, and because the desire to listen to those things, it has actually given me a conscience. And I do today know the difference between right and wrong, true and false. And because of that, I've been given some values. Simple values. Simple values that I had no values, even thought of, like the marriage vow. See, me and that lady have been together for 32 years. 16 years of drinking and 16 years of sobriety. I haven't cheated on her in over 16 years. Been faithful to her. And what that puts in that relationship is trust. Trust. Something I didn't know anything about. You see, trust is an unbelievable commodity. It's something that puts a freedom there. And I've been going around here doing these things the best of my ability, and I've had a lot of surrenders since I come to Alcoholics Anonymous. I've had to go through a lot of surrenders. I've had to find out that everything in my life has had to fail me before I would go to my God. Everything. Everything has had to fail me. Money, property, prestige, people, places, and things. It had to fail me before I go to my God. But because of that, I've established some new values. And those values have set me free. And freedom's what I look for all my life. Freedom to walk out on the street and hold my head up. You see, I've been here all day long. I've been with you. I've been with the best of them, man. This is the best of them. And I walked around here from the second I woke up to this heartbeat right now with you. The tall ones, the short ones, the rich ones, and the poor ones. And the amazing thing that you've given me is from the second I woke up to this heartbeat right now. I've not seen anybody or thought of anybody I'd rather be than me. God, I looked for that in every drink I ever took. And I came here, and little by little you uncovered, like peeling an onion, like pulling off the layers, what has come out as spiritual muscles. Sometimes it seems like it's arrogance, but it's strength. The ability to walk out there and hold my head up. The ability to know a true freedom. The ability to be a father. That little girl that lived in that house that come out of that closet. If you can imagine the horror and the terror and the lack of, the absolute hopelessness of that child in that closet, and you can identify with that. Maybe some of you have been there, maybe some of you are going there. I don't know. But if you can imagine that, then don't cheat yourself of this. Today, this day, that little girl's 29 years old. She lives in Milan, Italy. She's an international model. She models in the Paris Fashion Show. She models in front of thousands of people. She's a ramp model. She walks on that ramp. She's looked beyond where others have feared to go. She's an active member of Al-Anon, and she loves her daddy, and she's forgiven her daddy. And probably the greatest thing about that is that I've forgiven me. And I don't care if she's 29 years, she'll always be daddy's little girl. And yet, you know, the freedom that I have in that relationship, and the freedom I have with that lady. She's my wife, my very best friend. She's my buddy, and I love her, and she ain't my sponsor, and I'm grateful for that. But we got something special. We got something special, and we've worked for it. We've worked for it. You earn this here. But we've got the examples before us that set the pace. You know, when I was new in Alcoholics Anonymous, I heard a guy tell a story, and I'll shut up with this. There's a story of a little cobbler man, and he died and he went to heaven. He was a beautiful little man. He worked in this little shop fixing shoes all his life. He gave everything he had to his whole community. And he died and he went to heaven, and he was standing in front of God, and God said, you know, cobbler man, you were a beautiful man. You worked all your life. You gave everything you had to your family and your community. There was only one flaw, and that was that you never really believed 100% in me. And the cobbler said, well, I don't know, I tried, I guess, you know, but and God said, well, you know, why don't you understand? The cobbler said, if I could have just seen you one time, Just once. If I could have seen you, or if I could have heard your voice just once, or if I could have touched you one time, I would have believed 100%. And God said, well, you remember one day you were working away in your shop and you looked up and a little girl was going down the street and she looked lost, and you went over to the door and you brought her in and you set her down on the bench there in your shop, and as she sat down, her feet stuck up, and you noticed that she had holes in her shoes, and the only thing you'd really give her other than some comfort, it was cold, and you put your coat around her, and you took her shoes off and you put new soles on her shoes and put them back on, and she was ready to go, and as she went out of the door, she turned and smiled at you. And the cobbler said, yeah, I remember that. Did you remember another day a little old lady was going down the street and she was lost and confused, and you went over and brought her in and found out her son was up the street somewhere, and you went and got him and brought him down and reunited them, and she was okay, and it was time for her to leave, and she said, bless you, my son. And the cobbler said, yeah, I remember that. Well, another day, an old bum come into your shop wanting some money, and you didn't have any, but you had a couple of sandwiches, and you offered him one of your sandwiches, and you sat down next to him, and you ate a sandwich, and he ate a sandwich. For that period of time, not a word was muttered. And all of a sudden, there you are, and it's time for him to go, and as he got ready to leave the shop, he reached over and he shook your hand, and he touched your hand. And the cobbler told God, I remember that. And the God said, well, the little girl's smile was my smile. That little old lady's, bless you, my son, was my voice, and that bum's handshake was my touch. I was there all the time. You just couldn't see, you couldn't hear, and you couldn't feel. Now, on any given day, if I want to believe, like I woke up this morning next to this lady, I love her with all my heart. And I love to lay there and I love to listen to her sleep easy, because I know the terror and the bewilderment of that alcoholic home, and she lays there, and I love to listen to her breathe, because I lay there and I know the uneasiness, and yet I know that we've come a long way. And usually, like many times, she'll roll over and put her arm around me, and sometimes early in the morning she'll say, baby, I love you. I'm grateful you're sober. If I want to believe that's my God talking to me, I can. Or like not too long ago, last August, that little girl came home to visit us, and she can come to our home because it is a home, and she feels safe there, and she came, and she, like always does, it comes time for her to leave, and she always, as she leaves, she looks at me and smiles. And if I want to believe that's my God smiling at me, knowing where that little girl come from out of that closet, I can believe that. Or like, I don't know how long ago it was, just a little while back, me and my daddy stood side by side. Two drunks, hopeless drunks, two bitter enemies, anything but father and son. And I stood there beside my father on a sad moment in his life when he was burying a lady he'd lived with for 40-some years. And I stood next to him as a son should stand next to a father, sober. I stood next to my father, and he put his arm around me, held me like a father holds a son, and I felt safe. And if I want to believe that's my God touching me, I can. Now, you might say that isn't right, but you can't say I'm wrong, because I'm sober and I feel good about me. And what's even better, I feel good about you. You see, that's all I ever wanted all my life, was to feel good about me. I came here and you gave me that. You gave me the freedom to be me. And that's all I ever wanted to be. If you're new or relatively new, don't look for something that ain't here. This is a very simple way of life. It's a way of life that will give you everything you ever wanted beyond your wildest drunken dream. It'll give you the freedom to walk out there. It'll give you the freedom to live with all the unresolved problems. And it'll give you the freedom of fear of people, so that you might be what you always wanted to be. Just God's kid. I've been here long enough to know that my God loves me just as I am. He takes me for what I am, and he puts me with you so that I can feel the camaraderie, the freedom, and the emotions that we're supposed to have. You've given me that by allowing me, a drunk, to come in and sit down with you. What a privilege. God bless and thank you.
Keith Reloaded, thank you. On behalf of the Blackstone Board of Trustees, I want to present you with this gift, the token remember us when you get a chance. And we love you and thank you, man, for sharing with us.
Thank you.
We'll close now with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom,